The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
This episode of the Charlotte Ledger Podcast is sponsored by Childcare Search. Finding childcare is more than checking a box. It's peace of mind. For over 40 years, Childcare Search, a service of Childcare Resources Incorporated, has helped families find safe, nurturing, quality childcare options. Their free referral service connects you to licensed programs that fit your family's needs. Visit findchildcarenc.org or call 1-888-600-1685 to talk to a childcare navigator today.
Welcome to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. I'm Steve Dunn. To find out more about the Charlotte Ledger, visit thecharlotteledger.com. I'm joined today by Mathew Flato, managing partner of Flato, a boutique litigation law firm, and recently author of Ocean Child, a novel about three half-sisters raised oceans apart who must fight the imprint of a broken father and forge their own definitions of belonging, resilience, and family. Welcome, Mathew.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time. How do you go from practicing attorney to published author?
You just do it. Most lawyers walk around with a book in their head, if not several. And over the years of tinkering with outlines and writing countless first chapters, some of which are pretty comical when you go back and look at it, at some point you just make it a priority, sit down and write it.
Well, it's got to be this moment. You're probably a reader, I would imagine. And you have ideas for books as time goes by, and it's something that you may have always thought you'd try your hand at. But one day, you actually sit down at the computer and start typing. How do you decide to do that? And how did that happen for you?
So when you start practicing law, you have a lot of good stories. Your case is a little more wild because you're taking a wider range of cases. But as you get more established, you start doing the same type of work over and over again. And I needed a creative outlet, somewhere where I could flex that muscle. And having kicked around these outlines and ideas of characters, it just felt good to just get in front of a computer and type. And next thing you know, it starts spilling out. So for me, it was the creative outlet that I used to have in taking kind of off-the-wall cases.
It sounds like you experimented with some ideas before the story and the characters that became Ocean Child actually came out through you.
Right. Actually, one of the most minor characters was the original protagonist, and the whole story revolved around him and the various women he dated. I found myself over time being more drawn to the women, and being able to link them together in retrospect brought out the novel. Changing the lens from that to what ended up happening brought it all together for me. It was the eureka moment.
So what's the difference between all the novels that you tried to start but didn't finish and this one? What made this one able to get done?
When you like your characters, it takes a life of its own. And when you're not inspired by a character, you find yourself imitating other authors. So when I was going back and looking, when you finish the novel, you start reminiscing and looking back at my old treatments. And one was a cheap knockoff of Hunter S. Thompson. Countless things where you're like, this is not original, it's not interesting. But when you find the character, it all falls into place. And with this book, it is a character-driven novel. There's plot, but it's secondary. And until you fall in love with the characters, it's hard to commit the time and energy to tell their story.
Did it start with one, or did you have an idea of a type of story that you were trying to tell?
Yeah, so in the original idea, I always had this scene in mind where the main character was this professional cricket player, and he was a celebrity and well-known, and he meets this girl who doesn't know who he is, doesn't care who he is. And that's a story told before, but what was interesting for me was this scene where she takes him to brunch at her parents' house, and her dad's the world's biggest cricket fan. And for the first time in her life, her dad was proud of her, not for anything she did, but by bringing home this person who she didn't even know who he was. And that one scene stuck with me, and I always tried to write it around that scene. When it finally occurred to me, no, the girl, Julia, she's the better story here. Like, what has happened in her life to come to this point where the first time she's gotten any affection from her father was happening to bring home a boyfriend that she didn't even know was a big deal.
When you say you played with it, do you mean you actually wrote out stories and scenes involving those scenarios?
Yeah, I did play with it in various ways, but it wasn't until I started focusing on the less important character as like, actually, she has the story here. This is the interesting part of this. That's when I pivoted. And then you get into the whole questions of, okay, am I the right person to tell her story?
So you've been doing these experiments, the treatments and the oral histories, and you've been, it seems like, working on trying to give birth to a novel for a while. What was the moment at which you knew that Ocean Child that it was going to go the distance, that was going to turn into a book and not just be another experiment that would lead to something else?
I outlined it, and it was a very detailed outline, and where, I had the 12 most important characters.
Had you ever done that before?
No. So
why did you decide to do it with this one?
Well, because it came together. It felt like a story worth telling, and I hit a point in my life where I needed the creative outlet. So sitting down and drafting I think it turned out to be a 15 or 20,000 word outline, which I wouldn't do that again necessarily, but that gave me the structure. So now I'm not just writing in a vacuum. I was writing towards something. And sure, the finished product ended up not following the outline that closely, but it was the act of outlining was the moment of commitment. That was okay, I'm doing this, because it's a technical step. It's not I'm bored, let me just write a chapter.
And it forces you to confront the beginning, middle, and the end, right? Like you gotta figure out where the thing's going on some level, right?
Yeah, you have to figure out which characters matter, which storylines matter, where you're going, and your themes.
You've said that most professionals you meet, you feel like they got a book rattling around in their brains somewhere. Why the vast majority of people don't write that book, right? Why do you think that is?
Because it comes later, right? So you sit there and say, I have to do my job. I have to spend time with my family, and I have a hobby I care about. And those 3 check boxes. And then also, if you have friends, there's not a lot of time left over. But I guess what I would submit is you'd be surprised. I wrote this book, and I don't feel like I shortchanged any of the other areas of my life. I just did a real audit of where I lose time.
Yeah, well, you freed up a lot of time by deleting Twitter, right?
It was, and got through election season, and I'm not a big social media person. I looked at it, I said, man, like there's enough hours here that if I literally dedicated the hours on scrolling on Twitter, that's going to be a good start.
So this may be a tip for anybody who's considering following in your footsteps, is you can literally just pull up on your phone, and then now there's an app somewhere in there, right, that'll show you how you spend your time on your phone.
If you're an Apple user, it's just screen time. And there's going to be an outlier, and it's going to surprise you. There's hours here. There's real hours that I'm not getting anything meaningful out of. And to transform that into a novel is a good feeling. If I wrote this novel, but I ignored my daughter for a year, or my job suffered, that's not a good trade-off. And I think what most people say is, when I'm retired or when my kid goes off to college, I'll pull back that time, but you don't know where life's going to be.
So from looking at your phone that you've got the time to do it, but I'll bet you it's not the same time. I would imagine that the time that you're spending scrolling on Twitter is not the same time of day that you sat down and wrote this book. I wonder how you carved out the time to do the actual writing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to steal some time for sure. And some people, it's very regimented. When I wake up, I'm going to write for an hour. For other people, it's just kind of filling in parts of the day. And what I ended up doing, and this sounds silly, I would bring my lunch to work. And I never did that. I would either go home, or I'd have lunch meetings, or I'd walk over to a restaurant. And I would spend that hour at my desk typing. And I'd close my door, and, sure, I would deal with if an emergency came up or a major client issue, I'd handle it, of course. But yeah, that's 5 hours a week right there. Steal another 5 hours during the week. If you're, my daughter's off doing homework or in the shower and the house is otherwise empty, go grab that time. And don't make it perfect, just get words on paper.
I was going to ask you if your style was to just sort of vomit it all out and then clean it up later, or if you're very deliberate when you're actually writing in the first instance.
That's where the outline is helpful. And, there's 2 schools of thought. Like Stephen King starts with a white document and sees where the story goes. Other people outline every single scene. I didn't do that either. For me, it was the big story beats, is the character arcs. All of that is outlined. And then within that structure, I allow myself
How do you learn how to even do that, right? Like,
to read a lot.
Yeah, you read a lot yourself. You're a consumer of novels. Did you use any guides or tip sheets or, like, I don't know, checklists of things to do?
YouTube has a treasure trove of information. Yes, I don't like manuals. I don't like how-tos. I like theory. And there's a lot of really good content, and you can get it from various angles. For me, it's about structure. So in terms of legal arguments, if you're going up in front of a judge or you're writing a brief, you're following a structure. But if you did a good job, the seams don't show. Same thing with writing a book. That's where the outline really helps, is you build the structure, but then if you do a good job, it disappears.
You used AI tools as in your process as well. And this is stuff that's really recently available. As we record this, it's only within the last couple of years that some of these tools have even existed at all. And but you've made great use of them. I want to make clear that AI did not write Ocean Child. Mathew Flato himself wrote Ocean Child, but you used this technology. How did you use it, and how did it help?
Yeah, I think the first important thing to get out there is that if AI co-writes your book's not going to be good. AI generative LLMs are strong at taking something bad and making it average, but it's equally proficient at taking something good and dragging it down to the middle. It literally, the whole purpose of the program is to pick the most optimal word, which is by definition the most average word. So anyone who wants, if you have a piece of garbage and you want to make it passable, sure, AI can help you. But if you have loftier ambitions, it's not a generative tool that you should be using. But where it does have a lot of value is creating a character Bible. If you're 2/3 of your way through the book, instead of having to go back and look, hey, when did this character do this? Or, my timeline's getting messy. You can plug in your pages and it will come back and give you a pretty decent timeline.
I'm curious about what you described as loftier ambitions, right? You, as a human being, you're trying to write something that's better than what an AI could come up with. I wonder, though, if you have the experience of your taste kind of scaring you in a way, your own experience in reading. You've read great books. You've read books that you've loved that affected you. Was that ever an issue with you? Do you ever read back over your stuff and feel like, this is terrible?
Yeah, and that's where you're never going to be satisfied. You listen to yourself on a podcast, you hate the way your voice sounds. Right? That's just the nature of it. And for me, the goal was to have my voice come through. Whether someone finds it profound or vacuous, that's up to them. And I'm putting it into the world, but it's my voice. And there's this one chapter right in the middle of the book, and it's indulgent. It's the longest chapter by far, and I really go into my core theory of the Horatio Alger, the American dream, what it is to pursue and achieve it, and how it's the journey, not the result. And various editors, everyone said it was your best written chapter. Most of them said it needs to go. And I really thought hard about that. And I'm like, that's my voice. That's my, that's what I'm trying to get out. And that's okay. And if that means some people get to that point in the book and that chapter doesn't resonate with them, feel free to skip it. That chapter, it comes up.
It stands out.
It does. And I'm proud of that chapter. And yes, maybe that should have been a short story on its own, but it does link the plot, and it does link the first part of the book to the second part of the book. I wouldn't call it a peripety necessarily, but it matters. Like it does move the plot. And that's where I push back. And at some point I'm arguing with editors and I'm like, no, this is my book.
We'll be right back to the conversation, but first, just wanted to pop in here with a reminder that this episode of the Charlotte Ledger podcast is presented by Childcare Search, Charlotte's trusted childcare guidance for families.
I'm interested in the concept of arguing with editors, right? Like, how much do you stand up for yourself because it's yours, and your name's on the thing, right? And to what extent do you allow yourself, because you're a lawyer too, right? You represent people all the time who think that they know something, right? They got judgment about cases. They've done their own research in certain circumstances, right? So how do you, and you got to talk to those people sometimes, and sometimes you just got to tell those people, look, I know what I'm talking about in a way that you don't. And you hired me to give you this advice, and here it is. How do you interact with editors who are trying to have that conversation with you?
A lot of the time I'm objectively wrong. And that's great. And I go and fix it. There are other suggestions where it's like, nope, this is my book. And I might be wrong and people might not like it, but I'm willing to send it and see what happens. But then when the editor says, you probably don't need 12 pages on the Greek Civil War. And I'm like, but I like it.
Wait. Are we talking, is this a literal thing? Like,
yeah.
you really had 12 pages on the Greek Civil War?
Yeah, the Greek diner owner, like, I got into it. And when he moved to Australia in 1972, and I had the whole thing about how the colonels ran, Greece after the, whatever. I liked it. But what I did, and here's a tip for an author. I made an author version where it's like 500 pages, and I have all of my stuff that was indulgent, except for the one chapter, which I kept. And I put it all in my author copy as an addendum. So if I ever want to look back and read about my 12 pages or whatever it was of the Greek Civil War, it's there. It's really, what's your goal? Are you writing for yourself or are you writing for an audience?
That's what I was going to ask you. Exactly that thing. What are you trying to accomplish?
When you write a book, you're writing it for an audience. Otherwise, it's a journal. So yes, some of the changes I make, the book written for me, make it 30 pages on the Greek Civil War. I'm all in. But someone doesn't like, skip it.
This is actually a unintentionally kind of weirdly good marketing for the book.
Yeah.
Because I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
You were kind enough to send me the audiobook, and I've listened to the beginning of it, but I have not read the book yet, and now I'm very curious about this chapter.
But when you get feedback, I had 3 different people I trusted tell me that my main character came across as a little bit petulant, that she would react to anger too quickly. And I missed that.
But what's wrong with that? Like, if that's who she is, like, she doesn't have to be likable in every way, does she?
No, she doesn't have to be likable, but her actions were extreme. Like, so when you step back, she would have an outsized reaction to a smaller thing. And in my mind, it all made sense. But reading it on the page and enough people give you the same feedback, you're like, yeah, that's a distraction. Like she's not reacting to that situation the way that character should.
That's right. It's giving you an inaccurate picture. It's leading you to believe that maybe that character's got like some mental illness or something. Yeah. There's something else going on that you didn't intend.
Right. And that wasn't the character in my head. And that's where feedback's important. And I went back and read it with fresh eyes. I'm like, those are good notes. I need to correct that.
It wasn't discernible to the reader. It sounds like that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah. What's interesting is there are 3 sisters. Most of the time I spent with this one sister, Julia. She probably has slightly more than the other 3 in terms of volume of book. My wife can't stand her. And what's interesting about it is that's one of the reasons she likes the book, is that she has a visceral bad reaction to this character, but she's invested, like she's in it. While the California-based character, sister, she really likes. She loves that character. While other people, it's the opposite. They think, Julia is just wonderful, and they don't get they don't get how she operates. And I think that's the part of the book I'm proud of, is that sort of pick your own adventure. Which of these women were drawn very differently on different ends of the Enneagram chart, and who you are can reflect on which person you get invested in, which person do you can't stand, and that's okay. They're not meant to be these perfect princesses. They're full-bodied people.
You've created this thing and you're on the cusp of putting it out into the world, and people are talking to you about this thing that you created. And I'm sure that most people are polite, and most people are pretty upbeat, but does that freak you out at all? Like, just to just make yourself vulnerable in that way, to show the world this thing that you've done?
It's the ultimate vulnerability. And it would have been easier to just write a legal thriller. That would have been easy. People would have expected it from me. And honestly, commercially, it'd probably be more viable because it fits my bio. But this was a story I had to tell first. Like, it was in me. It might not turn out to be my best book, but I'm proud of it. It's the exact story I wanted to tell. And I did get feedback, and I did use that feedback to help make it better, but not to veer from what I was trying to do. So I did go back and write some chapters, and it was actually nerve-wracking because I was already done with copy editing, And there was 2 or 3 scenes I had to re-add or add for the first time because they weren't there. I found my first version that was, complete and edited was down to 94,000. The finished one is 100,000.
So 100,000 words.
Words. So
how many pages of a book is that?
I mean, that could be anywhere from 330 to 350, depending on font size.
Kind of average size novel. Would
Yeah,
you say?
it's for this genre. That's right in the sweet spot of where you want to be. And I get paranoid because when I'm cutting things, I'm dipping under 90,000. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't want this to turn into a novella.
Right.
But there was I had enough things to add. But I guess my advice to people who want to write, don't worry about any of that on your first draft. Tell your story. Get your characters out there. And if you want to go back later and talk about, the handbag that she's using or the shoes he's wearing, there's time in post-production. Great for anachronisms. So, if my story takes place in that sort of 2010 range, do they have that kind of phone? I had it scan the book and say, is there anything in here? Did that restaurant I talk about not exist in 2010? I could find 3 more typos in here. I'm sure your listeners, if any of them decide to check out the book, I'm sure there's something in there that's not perfect. But every line, as any lawyer can tell you, you could rewrite any line in your book.
Well, I heard that there's this very polarizing chapter right in the middle. I think
it's a masterpiece.
All the readers are going to be able to make their own decision when the time comes. I'm sure we get some spirited feedback, maybe pro and con, right?
Which is fine. That means people care.
Yeah,
for sure. If I read something and I don't care, then if I don't have a reaction one way or the other, it's a forgettable story. The hardest part of the process is you want to hook people early in the book, but you got to get the foundation laid. That's why, every thriller, they're like, you need a dead body in the first paragraph. Well, this is not a book that lends itself to a dead body in the first.
No, but there's a meaningful email involved in this book, and it comes out on the first page or second page, something like that, right?
And it has to.
Yeah.
Because if not, people are, without conflict, what's the point?
Well, and you also got to get right to it. Yeah, you don't need to hear about the ragu going down the esophagus or the waves crashing against the shoreline for the first 5 pages. You need to find out what's happening here.
Yeah. Why did he push you? What did you do? What did he do?
Right.
You need conflict, or else your mind washes over.
All right. Okay. So you got to decide to write the book. You got to find time and a process, and then physically write the book. And then now you got this book. And what do you do with that? What is the process of, well, one of the things you got to figure out is, are we going a traditional publishing route or a self-publishing route, right? And so what are the pros and cons of that? And I'd love to hear just how all the things that you've had to do and think about in getting this thing launched.
Yeah, I mean, starting out on this book, I was going to do the first one textbook. I was going to hire professionals. I was going to get it properly edited at every stage of the way. And I was going to create a finished product that I was proud of, because I didn't know if this would be the only book I ever write, and I wanted it to be done well. You're missing this plot point. It's a big picture analysis. And then you go back and you rewrite it, take the suggestions you want, reject the other ones you want. After that, you have a copy editor, and that's the grammar police. And then the final stage is the proofreader. They go back and they read the final version to look for typos. AI actually did a better job than her.
Well, I was about to ask if that's something that a human being really needs to do.
I tested it. I took their feedback, and I ran a fairly detailed prompt through AI where I fed it a chapter at a time. So I didn't overwhelm the model with an entire 100,000 words. I went chapter by chapter. And yes, the AI found more typos than the human.
You got to be a relentless self-promoter in this business, right? I mean, you got a website, you got to be out there on the socials, you got to do the podcast circuit, which you are doing literally right now, right? You got to let everyone know that this thing exists, right? Because it's not just going to happen on its own.
Yeah, and that's where I feel the most uncomfortable in this whole process. It's not my nature. And if you just, our website is meflato.com, so I'm plugging it so my marketing people can...
They'll be happy.
I actually did that.
Let us not let this conversation expire without getting the website out there.
They were very concerned that I wouldn't do that. But that's the hardest part. Like sitting at a book fair table, I'm fine. And I'm kind of excited to let the general public come through. And as a lawyer, I'm used to talking to the general public. And I'm fine selling at a table. But what terrorizes me is the idea of inviting friends and family and acquaintances and people that I know in the legal community to some kind of book launch. And that's my wife, who is a professional marketer, she's like, we have to do a book launch. And that makes me very uncomfortable. I don't like calling in favors. I don't like asking, people to come and celebrate something I did. And that's very unnatural to me. And I haven't really reconciled how I'm going to do that part of it.
I think you just got to do it, man. I think that you're going to have to overcome the reluctance that you're experiencing, although it's natural and understandable and consistent with who you are.
I'm asking people to buy my book. And if this book's ever going to be profitable, it's not going to be on the backs of friends and family. It's going to, the Amazon algorithm's going to have to pick it up, and I'm going to have to, do real detailed Amazon advertising. That's where the rubber hits the road. So, you're hitting up friends and family, but that's a small drop in the bucket of the books I need to sell and isn't even really important. The hope is you did a good enough job where some percentage of the people read it and then say, hey, buddy, this is actually a good book. And that's how it takes off. If the book is bad, it's dead on arrival, and that's okay. I can live with that.
Well, I don't see you quitting your day job either, right?
No.
I mean, you're not counting on this to make a living at all.
But you get competitive.
Of course. I mean, you'd like it to be successful.
Sure. But needle in a haystack there. In this day and age, independent authors are better at Amazon. They know how to do the algorithm. They know how to market. And local bookstores hate Amazon. So if you go to your local bookstore and you say, hey, take these books on consignment, I'm a local author, here's my story, a lot of them will.
How local is local in that initiative that you're doing? Like how far of a radius are you going for that?
Not far. So, the greater Charlotte metro. Part of this book takes place in Carlsbad, California. So I'm not opposed to heading out there and saying, hey, this book is partially based in this little area of San Diego County that I've always adored. That's a hook. Will they do it? I don't know, but there's not a huge bar of entry. If you're handing them the books and saying, hey, if you sell them, great. If not, throw them in the garbage. You don't have to mail them back to me. You don't owe me anything. But the hope isn't that those 12 books sell. The hope is that enough people read those and come back to them and say, hey, we really like this. And that's where they can order it. And, that's how a book takes off, is you just get in front of people and it's actually good. If it's not good, it doesn't matter. It's print on demand. So if someone goes on Amazon on November 7th, when the book releases on Amazon, and you order it, it'll literally print in a fairly local facility and be mailed to you in 2 days. And that's the big advantage of being a self-published author these days, is that the traditional model is they print 10,000 copies or whatever the giant number is, and it sits in a warehouse. You have to store it. And if you look at the quality of the book, it's no worse. And especially for a paperback, it's a huge advantage to not have to have warehouse space or, I ordered a couple hundred copies for myself to take to book fairs or, whatever book launch. But other than that, I'm not going to keep any inventory.
Well, here you are. You have learned a lot, right? Just going through this process.
I had no idea about any of it. And YouTube is an amazing resource. A lot of people are very willing to share their experiences.
Well, it must be an exciting moment. I'm sure I'm sure you're ready to finally sort of have this thing launched and just see what happens with it, and to be, you're not done, but you will. It's a huge milestone, right? It's not the end, but it's a big moment in the history of the thing. You nervous?
Yeah, it's a classic. What do you put into it? So do you chase it by really advertising hard on Amazon, or do you get your friends and family reading it, and if it takes off because people like it and recommend it, let it be? Or am I really going to double down and learn to game the Amazon algorithm like I do for my law firm's website on Google back in the day? That's going to be the next decision, is how hard do I want to chase it? And I don't know the answer yet.
I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. Mathew Flato, thank you so much for joining me on the Charlotte Ledger podcast. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. This episode was produced by Lindsay Banks. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger by visiting thecharlotteledger.com.
This podcast episode was presented by Child Care Search, helping families find safe, quality childcare with free referrals and support every step of the way.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.